Sunday evening again, time for Old Testament studies in 2 Samuel chapter 6. We've been following David through 1st and 2nd Samuel thus far. He's finally become king over all of Israel, both southern and northern, Israel and Judah. He's moved his capital, or is in the process of moving it to Jerusalem, which belonged to neither one of the tribes. They had to run the Philistines out first. So it's becoming the political center for the nation, and he's making it the religious center of the nation too, here in chapter 6 tonight of 2 Samuel. So again, David gathered together all the chosen men of Israel, 30,000 of them, and David arose, and he went with all the people that were with him from Baale-judah to bring up from thence the ark of God, not to be confused with Noah's ark, but the ark of the covenant, or the ark of God. Ark, I guess, just as a name for a box. You know, Noah's ark was just a huge, big box, rectangular. If you read the dimensions, God was the engineer. He gave the blueprints to Noah, and it looks like to be rectangular because you didn't need a sharp cutting nose to go through the waves like today, because all the ark was designed for was to float above. I think Moses was put in an ark of bulrushes, think like a basket, just a little floating box that he was put in, made out of bulrushes. And the Ark of the Covenant, or the Ark of God, sometimes called, was a big box, to put it in layman's terms, overlaid with gold. And it was like the most holiest object on earth. It had the cherubims on top facing one another. And when approached the way God told him to approach it, he would meet with them there through the blood of the sacrifice. And it was placed inside the tabernacle, or the tent of meeting. And the first part of the tent was called the holy place. That took up about 2/3, and you made sacrifices as you approached to get closer to God. And only behind that curtain in the other part, the 1/3 of it in the very back, was the Ark of the Covenant. And they only went there once a year. The high priest, the only one that went in there on the Day of Atonement. And God would meet with them there in the Shekinah, shining glory of God between the cherubim. So it was the box, the ark, that was the symbol of the presence of God with his people here on earth. That's what tonight's chapter is about, the Ark of the Covenant. So what did I stop on? Chapter 6, verse 2. David arose, went with all the people from Baale-judah, and he went for a mission to bring up the ark of God, whose name is called by the name of the Lord of hosts, that dwells between the cherubim on top of the ark. And they set the ark of God up on a new cart. Now, if you know much about the Old Testament, God gave the very minute details of how to build that ark to Moses, and how to transport that ark. And when they went for the 40 years through the wilderness, God very carefully instructed, now nobody ever touches it. It's got loops on each side, and it's got staves or sticks that you slide in the loops. And only the Levites can move it, but they don't touch it. They handle it with those staves that are covered with gold, and they bear it upon their shoulders, and they carry it through the desert, but they never touch it. Well, David, he's got a good idea. We're going to bring the Ark of God and put it in Jerusalem, because we're going to set up a tent of meeting there at the tabernacle. We're going to make it the religious center of our nation. And he's got a good goal in mind. But this just goes to show you that the goal doesn't always justify the means. He's not doing it the way God said to do it when he moved it. So keep that in mind. People's going to get in trouble here. So they set the Ark of God upon a new cart, verse 3. Well, you already made a mistake. God's already said you don't move this on a cart. The Levites carried on their shoulders on them staves or sticks. And they brought it out of the house of Abinadab, where it had been stored, that was in Gibeah. And Uzzah and Ahio, almost like Ohio, but he's Ahio, the sons of Abinadab, they drove the new cart. So you got the Ark of the Covenant sitting up on a cart pulled by oxen, and these guys driving it. So they brought it out of the house of Abinadab, which was at Gibeah, accompanying the ark of God, and Ahio went before the ark. And David and all the house of Israel played before the Lord. Remember, David's a musician. He writes all these songs called Psalms over here, so many of them. And remember, he played his harp before Saul. So David's a great musician. So when David's in this grand occasion of bringing the ark into Jerusalem, says, hey, we got to get the band together. We're going to have all kinds of music. So they played before the Lord on all manner of instruments made of fir wood, even on harps, psalteries, timbrels, cornets, cymbals, everything they could think of. They were making a joyous noise before the Lord. And when they came in verse 6 to Nachon's threshing floor, Uzzah, who was one of them up there driving the cart, he put forth his hand to the ark of God, took hold of it, for the oxen shook it. They hit a pothole, hit a bump in the road. And the ark was bouncing around back there. Uzzah put his hand up there instinctively to steady it, maybe keep it from sliding off the cart, and he fell over dead. And what happened to him? God killed him. The anger of the Lord was kindled against Uzzah, and God smote him there. That means God killed him there for his error. He made a grave error. He decided that he knew better. David and all of them was responsible for this. Uzzah's the one that died, but they knew what God had said, but they ignored it or thought this will be okay, or they justified themselves. We're doing something good. Bottom line is they thought they knew better than God, like a lot of people do today. God forbids something, and some people want to celebrate it. So the anger of the Lord was kindled against Uzzah. God smote him there for his error, and there he died by the ark of God. A dead Uzzah laying right there by the box, by the ark of the covenant. And that hurt David's feelings. David was displeased because the Lord had made a breach upon Uzzah, or an outburst upon Uzzah can be translated. And he called the name of the place Perez Uzzah, or outburst upon Uzzah place, to this day that this was written. And David was afraid of the Lord that day, as he should have been. If you're not doing something, if you got out of the will of God, so many times in the Bible, God's words are, fear not, But if you're doing something wrong and you're willfully doing something against the will of God, then you ought to be afraid, like David was. David was afraid of the Lord that day. And he said, how shall the ark of the Lord come to me? Or I guess he asked the Lord, said, how should I do this? And the Lord probably finally directed him, said, you do it the way I told you to do it, David. So David would not remove the ark of the Lord unto him to the city of David. He went back home, pouting for a while. But David, he carried it aside, probably to the nearby house of a man named Obed-Edom, the Gittite. And the ark of the Lord continued in the house of Obed-Edom, the Gittite, for 3 months. And the Lord blessed Obed-Edom and all his household. Now, when the presence of God's in your house, he's going to bless your house and all your family too. And it was told King David, saying, the Lord's blessed the house of Obed-Edom and all that pertains unto him, because of the ark of God. So David went and brought up the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom into the city of David with gladness. So now David says, we need to do this right, and we need to do it God's way. And when you're doing things God's way, there's a gladness to serving God. And that's what David's discovering. And it was so that when they that bear the ark of the Lord, now they're doing it the right way. Now they've put the staves in it, and it's Levites, and they put it upon their shoulders, and they walk 6 paces, and they set it down. They're going to offer sacrifices. They didn't have to do sacrifices there 6 paces, but David's doing that as a way of honoring God here. So it was so when they bear the ark of the Lord 6 paces, he sacrificed oxen and fatlings. And David danced. He danced a joyful dance because the gladness of the Lord was in him. He's doing things God's ways. He danced before the Lord with all his might. Nothing half-heartedly. He did it with all his might. And David was girded with a linen ephod being the priestly garments, I think. But anyhow, the gist of the story is David's wearing sort of a skirt-like thing, right, as people would have worn back then. And he's dancing before the Lord. And he's whirling around, and his wife, Michal, one of his first wives, remember, Saul's daughter, she's going to look out the window, and she's going to be ashamed of him, and she's going to, be mad at him when he comes home because she said he was showing himself. So verse 15, David and all the house of Israel brought up the ark of the Lord with shouting, joyful shouting, and with the sound of the trumpets blowing. And as the ark of the Lord came into the city of David, Michal, here she is, Saul's daughter, she looked through a window, and she saw King David leaping and dancing before the Lord, and she despised him in her heart. She couldn't have any joy about the things of the Lord. And they brought in the ark of the Lord, and they set it in his place in the midst of the tabernacle that David had put up, that David had pitched for it, the big tent of meeting. And David offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. David knows that, hey, if we're going to be right with God, it's always going to be because of the offerings that have been made. That there's the blood and the innocent victim sacrifice, which were all pointing to Christ. The only way we can be right with God is because Jesus offered his own body and shed his own blood to make peace between us and God. He was the innocent victim. And as David had made an end of offering burnt offerings and peace offerings, he blessed the people in the name of the Lord of hosts. And he dealt means he think of dealing cards, but he has given them something. He had something to give all the people. What did he give them? He dealt among all the people, among all the whole multitude of Israel, as well as the women and as men. He gave every one of them a cake of bread and a good piece of flesh. Sounds a lot like a good breakfast biscuit, don't it? But there wasn't no ham or sausage on it. These were Jews. And a flagon of wine to chase it down with. So all the people departed, every one to his house. It's a feast. He's honoring the Lord by giving everybody a feast to take home with them. It doesn't hurt your status as being king over them either. So then David returned to bless his household. And Michal, the daughter of Saul, there she is. They ain't had a very good relationship since Saul gave her to him. Michal, the daughter of Saul, came to meet David, and she said, and now she's going to be kind of smart-alecky, says, how glorious was the king of Israel today, who uncovered himself today in the eyes of the handmaids of his servants, as one of the vain fellows shamelessly uncovers himself. I saw you out the window. You was out there dancing and showing yourself to them other girls out there. You're no better than them perverts down on the corner that expose themselves. That's a good paraphrase, by the way. And David said to Michal, it was before the Lord. I was serving God, which chose me before your father and before all his house to appoint me ruler over the people of the Lord of Israel. Therefore will I play before the Lord. And that kind of made David mad too, as you might guess. So David says, and I'll be more vile than this. And I'll be more base in my own sight. And of those maidservants you're worried about, which thou hast spoken of, they respect me. Of them shall I be had in honor. Therefore, last verse, therefore, Michal, the daughter of Saul, had no child until the day of her death. That means that was sort of the end of her and David's relationship. He didn't want to have nothing else to do with her. And if you're not happy about the things of God, then you don't have a very good relationship with the Lord either. See you next time.